If you enjoy landscape photography and capturing the fall colors, then this quick tip is for you. This image was sent to me by a subscriber for me to work with during a recent photo editing live stream. I did a bunch of basic edits using Lightroom Classic, and then I took it over to Luminar Neo to do some final touches and a sky replacement. Hi, I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor, and if you are ready to see the entire process from start to finish, let's get started. Right, so the first thing in the basic panel is choosing the camera profile. Right, if you pull down this menu, you'll only see Adobe ones and camera standard, which is sort of the default. But if you open it up here, which is the little browse button, you'll see a bunch more, including camera ones. Okay, so these are the same profiles that your camera has when you're shooting. Okay, so you could choose landscape, and in this case, the colors go really wild on that one. Okay, portrait, neutral, standard. Now, if we want the colors to pop, I generally don't want to do that with the profile, right? Because I want to control the tones a little bit more. And if I'm going to add black and color, I want to have a bit more control rather than starting from one that's already really, really saturated. So in this case, I might go with either neutral. Neutral looks a little bit less red. See how I'm looking at the rocks and down here? This one looks really red, and this one just looks neutral. So I'm going to go with neutral in this case. And then I'm going to do my usual shift double click on the whites and blacks. So hold down the shift key, double click the words. Okay, so whites and blacks. And notice the black didn't move. Okay, so if we want to check that, we'll use the Alt Option key. Okay, now there's a tiny little bit of black clipping over here, but I'm going to go a little farther. So remember, we do want to clip the blacks. We don't want to clip the whites. So if you're doing this with the sliders and the Alt key, take it up until you see clipping and then just bring it back down. And all that's doing is it's setting what's called the white point and the black point. So the white point is just touching the edge of the histogram on the right, but not going over. Okay. Now from here, now we can decide, okay, what do we want to do? If I bring down the highlights, which is doing a good thing on the bottom here, it's also bringing the highlights down on the leaves. Okay, so keep in mind, everything here is a global edit. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I want to keep the highlights in the trees because they sparkle already, right? The lighting here is really great. The texture, if we zoom in, like look at the texture in the trees, right? And the sky is super blue. I'm curious, Marty, did you use a polarizer on this one? Because it looks like a polarized sky to me, right? All right, so I'm going to add a little bit of clarity here, again, globally. So that applies to the whole image. And then I want to tone down this bottom area here. Okay, so now we're going to get into either using the HSL adjustments here, or we could get into the masking. Okay, so I'm going to try HSL first and using the luminance panel, which is brightness. Okay, so I'm going to click on the targeted adjustment tool, and then I'm going to go to the rocks. And when I click and drag here, okay, it's going to adjust only the tones that are in the rocks. But you see what's happening? It's affecting the leaves as well, which is what I suspected. Okay, so again, that's not going to work because it's applying to the trees and I don't want it to. So we're going to have to go to masking. So to go to the new masking tools, okay, you'll notice that when you open it, it looks completely different now. Okay, so we can still select the subject in the sky, which we could do before, but now we have a choice of selecting the background. So previously we had to select the subject and then invert it if we wanted the background. Now they've made that a one-click thing. So they probably got some questions or feature requests from users to do that. Okay. This one here might work well with a linear gradient because I can still just drag it up from the bottom. And that's mostly what's going to be applicable here. So I am going to use a linear gradient just to darken this bottom part. Okay. Now I've changed my mask here to show color overlay on black and white. So when I put the mask on, I'm seeing red where the mask is going, and the rest of the image, or the image, turns into black and white. Okay. You could change this here, right? When you have your mask, just by clicking these little three dots here. So you can change the color of the overlay, right? For example, I can just change it to green, right? Or you could change how it looks, right? So color overlay over top of the original image, over black and white, right? Or now I'm seeing what's masked is in color and what's not masked is in black and white, which is actually kind of a nice view, to be honest, because I can really see now what's being affected, right? So this is a good choice. So consider changing these ones here, right? Now I can see it on black and so on, right? So kind of like this view here. So I'm going to go with this view for now, today. So we're doing a different masking view. That's all. So all this is telling me is the part that's in color is currently selected. Okay. Now I have to do some adjustments to it. So I'm going to bring the highlights down. And as soon as I drag the slider, you see the whole image show up again. Okay. If you want just the mask to show, press O on your keyboard and it will show the mask again, right? In this manner, whatever manner you've chosen here, right? So I'm going to darken like so, right? Now, what if I don't want the bridge darkened? Because the bridge is sort of, part of the main subject here, okay? This is where we can do a subtract, okay? So I want it applying to everything here except the bridge, okay? So subtract, and I'm going to use another of the new features, which is objects, okay? So if we say subtract object, now you have a choice of right here under mode, either painting it in with a brush or using a little square selection. So I'm going to use a square selection because it's kind of a square subject. And I'm literally just going to draw a box over the bridge. So then Lightroom will analyze what it thinks is the object that I'm trying to select. You see that? If I turn this mask on, okay, see how it's deselected the bridge? It's part of that, right? And if I want, I could deselect these bushes and stuff as well. But you can see now it's done a good job of finding the bridge. So if we look at this mask, it's just darkening the foreground. So I'm going to rename it foreground. Right? I might do a second one. And I'm going to darken the foreground again, but just this bottom edge. So I'm just going to go from the bottom up about like that. So I want to get this edge darker, right? Because your eye is going to these bright rocks in the corner here, and I want to minimize your eye going there, okay? Like so. That looks better. See the difference? And I didn't use a vignette here because I don't want to darken the sky anymore, right? It's already pretty dark because if I use a vignette, it's going to go all the way around all the edges, okay? So that looks pretty good. And I can call this bottom right corner, right? So if you name your masks and then you have other similar images, if you copy and paste, right? So for example, if I close this here, so if I copy, right, see how it shows the masking and it shows the name of the masks, right? If I just had mask 1 and mask 2, I don't know what that is if I'm copying it to decide to paste it onto another image. So if you name your mask, if you take a moment to do that, it just gives you a better, more information when you're copying and pasting, or if you're making a preset out of it, okay? I'll show you a preset that I made as a little aside here, okay? All right, so there's also some presets that came with Lightroom. All right, let's take another look. So now I'm going to go back to the basic panel. Okay, so far I've just done some tone control down here. We haven't adjusted the color or anything. I'm going to brighten it up overall a little bit. Check the clippings again. Okay, so we're still good. That looks good. And then I want to check the color temperature because it does feel a little bit overly warm. right? If I dial this down a little bit, you see the blue of the sky shifts and the foreground becomes less red. Okay, so it was looking a little bit red. If I use a daylight preset, it usually gets pretty close. Again, I've mentioned this before. I find that if you dial the magenta down to, or the tint down to 5 as opposed to 10, it gets you pretty close. I'm just going to close this panel for a moment because I'm not using any of the presets. Actually, let's do a small edge vignette on this one. You see if I do medium, it starts to darken the sky too much. Can you see that? So I'm just going to do a low edge vignette. That's one of my presets from my preset pack. And all it's doing is adding a post-crop vignette. Great. All right, so to replace the sky, Marty, you can't do that in Lightroom. That's not something that Lightroom can do. So if we want to replace the sky, you have to take it to either Photoshop or to Luminar. What's your preference, Marty? Because if you want, I can show you that in Photoshop. It's not my favorite way, and I'm actually just going to lighten the sky a little bit because I feel it's gone a little bit too dark. So if we're going to do a sky replacement, right, there's two ways to get from Lightroom into Luminar or a plugin, whatever plugin you're using, okay? If you right click and choose edit in, okay, we can just open it directly into Neo, all right? Or we can open it as a smart object in Photoshop, okay? So let's do that because if we go the smart object route, it means it's non-destructive. If we're doing a final edit and we know that all we want to do is change the sky and then bring it back into Lightroom to finish it, then we can just go directly to Neo. You'll get a finished TIFF image, okay, coming back into Lightroom. If you go to Photoshop, then you'll have options of doing other things in Photoshop, and it'll become what's called a smart filter, and you can get back to it at any time. So if you change your mind and you want a different sky, you can go back and change it. In the essence of speed, I'm going to use this route. So we're going to edit a copy, and it's going to give us a TIFF over in Luminar. All right, so we know we're going to want sky, and going down here to creative, we'll find the sky AI. Okay. Let's look in my collection and see if there's anything here. I'm going to actually look under the blue sky because I think if we just add some clouds, these are ones that come with Luminar. One of these ones might do a nice job just to break up that solid blue a little bit. Okay, so see what it's doing. It's a little dark, but we can see if we can brighten it. Okay, those are not bad. It looks a little dark. Okay, what do we think about these clouds? The clouds give it a little bit of texture. Let's try one of these. I don't mind that one. Let's go with this one. And we need to brighten it a little bit. And I'm going to cool the sky down so it's more blue. Okay, and I don't necessarily want to relight the scene. I just want to do the sky. Right? And we might need some masking here. We don't need any reflections in this water. I don't think that water is going to reflect. But I want to refine the mask a little bit because I want to make sure that it's going nicely around these trees. And you see here, there's a little bit of sort of weirdness there. So I'm going to increase that. I find the fixed details one does a really nice job around trees. I still see some weird stuff there. Maybe we need a little more global. Global will help the sky fit over top the original sky better. No, let's try this one. There we go. See, do you see that little thing I was looking at there? It was like this little sort of outline of this trees right there, but it's not perfect, right? So if I increase this one, that did the job. Right. Now I'm seeing a lot of sort of grain in the sky here. Let's see if we can solve some of that. It's picking up grain. I might blur the sky a little bit to see if we can solve that. Let's just defocus it. Yeah, for some reason it's picking up a lot of grain here. And I think that has to do with the darkness of the original sky. We're trying to brighten over top. Let's try that. We may have to do some softening on the sky just to solve this grain problem. How does that look? You see, it is brightening up these leaves here as well, right? So I might want to mask it off of those leaves. I'm just going to do a little erase here and lower the opacity because I don't want it brightening these leaves. There we go. Okay, so there is our sky replacement. Now that I've got it sort of in place and masked, we could try different skies. Let's try dramatic sky. See, I don't think these are going to work well. We definitely need something that's got the sun in it, right? We need something like this because it's a bright sunny day. That one's actually not bad. Let's maybe flip it. There we go. It's kind of getting the top of that tree as well. So I'll go back in and just mask it off the top of the tree. Just a little bit here. Yeah, it's doing that weird grain thing. No idea why it's doing that. Quite bizarre. Okay, so then we have that. I think if I do a mystical, which many of you know was one of my favorite here, especially for landscape, I think if we do a mystical overall, look at what a nice job that does of sort of, you know, giving it this sort of really ethereal glowing, especially the trees make a nice glow here. So I'm going to go quite high with this one. And then I'm just going to mask it off of the bridge. Let's see how Mask AI does. For those of you in the Luminar Neo course, you would have gotten an email like right about now, actually, notifying you that there's some new lessons in the course. So I have added one on the, what did we do? The clone tool and HDR. So there are 2 new lessons, and the recording from the last live that we did a week ago has been added to the various lessons as well. Okay. So I'm going to go natural ground because I want to keep it off of these parts here. Okay, so I'm trying to get this selected. It's chosen that. There we go. That looks good. All right, so I'm going to go with this type of mask. This gets me close because I want to do mystical everywhere except these areas. So I'm just going to switch it and paint in this area that it missed. There we go. Okay, so now when I go with mystical, it's not doing it so much on the bridge. Okay, I keep it here. I'm using the erase. So remember they changed the tool. So now if I switch from erase to paint in, see the brush, the middle of my brush here, it shows a minus sign. If I click X on my keyboard, it changes to plus. So plus is painting and the minus or dash is erase. So I don't want the bridge to be blurry. I want the bridge to be nice and sharp. Maybe even the rocks. Okay, so the rocks wouldn't glow so much. There we go. Okay, so see what a nice job that's doing on the trees. If I zoom in a little bit, right, it gives them this really, like, I don't know how to explain it. Do you feel like sometimes the trees just glow, like there's a certain light? And that's why I love this filter or this tool, because it does such a great job of bringing out that feeling, right? Without making the image look actually out of focus. Okay, we can lift the shadows if we want, less contrast. I think the benefit of this image is that there is so much contrast, right? You've got a ton of darks and lights against each other. And I might even come back in and crop it a little bit when we come back to Lightroom, or do some dodging and burning in here, even a little bit more. Okay, so I like what's happening with Mystical. And I'm just going to do a dodge and burn, darken. Remember, keep the strength really low, like between 10 and 20. Okay, and I'm going to darken. So even on the dodge and burn tool, you can see it's got a minus. Let's try. Aha, it does work. Okay, so the switching the brushes works here as well. So minus is darken, plus is lighten. Watch the buttons on the thing change as I click X. Okay, so I'm going to minus because I want to darken. I really want to bring this front area down in density. Okay, because your eye, I don't want the eye going over here. I want to keep the eye in the image. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to turn it off. See what I'm doing? I'm just drawing the eye away from the edge of the picture in. And I might even do that over here, okay, as well. So just keep the eye away from the edges. Look what that did with the contrast. Okay. I love these trees here. Love, love, love those trees there. Okay. So there's our before and after. Another tool that's great in Luminar that we don't have in Lightroom or Photoshop is the color harmony tool and the color contrast slider. Okay. If we wanted to add more contrast, okay, so look what happens. We get more contrast in the yellow and it darkens the blues. If we go the other way around, we can lighten the blues and darken the yellows. Okay, so if I want to lighten the sky a little bit, I could use this one. See how it's just softening the sky a little bit? Like so. Let's see if doing the Mystical, yeah, we still got a little bit of grain around there. I would go in and do some denoise and just paint it in on this area. Okay, but I'm not going to get into that level of detail here. So I'm happy with that image. Okay, so now we're back here in Lightroom. Let's compare the two versions. Okay, so Lightroom is on the left and after Luminar is on the right. And if we, oh, that's a little bit too much zoomed in. And if we zoom in, you can see what that sort of glow has done, the Mystical, what that's done on the leaves. Yeah, we can definitely see this weird grainy halo here. We definitely have to work on that. So I would have gone back and either fixed that in Luminar, or if I had done that in Photoshop, I could have just masked it to that area in there as well. Thanks for watching. This was a clip from one of my weekly live streams where I demonstrate photo editing using subscriber-submitted images. If you enjoy my teaching style and you want more step-by-step instructions to learn the software, check out Luminar Neo, the complete course. You'll find a link to it in the pinned comment below. Click either of the videos on the screen now to watch more photo editing tutorials using Luminar Neo, Lightroom, and Photoshop.